Okay, so I showed you my tree mods. I showed you my list. The only issue I have is I'm losing quite a bit of frames with this current setup, and I might drop enhanced. I might drop enhanced landscapes and go back with Veda Sprawl, because Veda Sprawl is much better on performance. But I just love the way this looks. This is peak, man. Like, so I'll tell you what I have. I already showed you the tree stack. So I have pines to oaks. I have the textures AIO. Like, dude, this is enhanced landscapes. Like, that just looks awesome. That tree hanging over the waterfall like that. Like, it's just so hard to drop. But at any rate, these are the textures for the AIO. They work perfectly with the fallen trees and such. And they also, coincidentally, pretty much, for the most part, match Lightwood. And I do have 1K. 2K would probably look a lot better. So I might test that out. But, I mean, like, honestly, this is probably the best foliage stack that I've had since I've been modding this game. Like, I'm just so satisfied with how this looks. I've got the dark, misty, Nordic medieval style tone from Dark Heart of Azeroth, which basically, like, this mod, even, this mod does a lot better job than any other weather mod I've ever found, as far as giving you like a true Nordic, cold, dark, kind of, you know, misty feel. And this mod just does a great job. And I really need to test it more, but how it handles fog and everything. Water files are included with this mod, and as you can see, even though I'm in foggy weathers, I have almost zero shorelines. And that's because Azerite, or Dark Heart of Azeroth, has a water mod baked into it called Noir Waterflow 2.0. And what this does is it corrects so many different things with water flow and the rapids, and it just works perfectly with blended shores. I've dropped the medieval mountains that I've gone with Northvale Mountains. They're slightly smaller file size, and I prefer the textures on Northvale Mountains than I do medieval mountains. I think they look realistic. These mountains look like mountains you would see in Scandinavia or in Norway. And so, yeah, pretty much. Oh, the grass stack. So for the grass stack, I have enhanced landscapes, full 1K, and that includes the grass, and it also includes LOD now. So all the added trees and added things that enhanced landscapes provides, now it has LOD. So it has a green, and it also has green terrain noise baked into it. So I have that, I have enhanced landscapes, and then I have Origins of Forest. Okay? And then there's a secret mod that I've added that I used to mess around with my grass stacks. but I've forgotten about it, and that's a little mod called Overgrown. And what this mod does is it takes your base grass, like whatever grass mod you're using, and it increases the size. So these ferns would normally, with enhanced landscapes, these ferns would normally be very small. They would be about a quarter of that size. But because I have overgrown, they're about 3 times their normal size. And on top of that, the grasses from enhanced landscape, like these reed grasses here, are also increased in size. It also touches the origins of forest and increases the size of the little foliage, or the little flora that these little trees that Origins of Forest adds. It increases the size of them as well. And Overgrown increases the density of grass, so you're gonna have to run it pretty high, even if you're on PS5, even if you're on a PS5 Pro. With this particular grass stack, you're gonna have to run a pretty high INI. As you can see, it's still pretty dense the way I have it, and believe it or not, in order to get decent performance, I've had to move this up to 95. So you might be able to go with 80 if you're on a PS5 Pro, and that's going to increase the density. But I don't recommend, if you're on a PS5 base, to go anything lower than 90. Just because of what Overgrown does, it essentially doubles the grass density. So if you think about it, you're doubling, in order to get the same results as if you were on like an INI 40, you would have to have like an INI 80, if that makes sense. And I just love the way this looks. I love how this is giving me these Nordic Scandinavian vibes. And if you look at Scandinavian trees, like I have a few pictures. I have a few pictures on my Discord of real Scandinavian trees. In my opinion, HLT is too bright. Because all of the spruces I've seen in places like Scandinavia and colder climates, they are darker. They're darker than, say, the spruces of North America or the spruces of Alaska are different than the spruces in Scandinavia. And so I'm going for a Scandinavian look, and I think I've achieved it. I think I've done a pretty satisfying job with this. I couldn't be happier with this current setup. I mean, let me just go into this forest over here. And like I said, this is on a setting of 95, so I mean, I could probably get by with 80, but this is so dense. I mean, really, do I need it more dense than this? And I personally don't like to have my grass so thick that I can't see my landscape terrain either. So, you know, a lot of mods will have grass so thick that you can't see your beautiful landscape textures. So, especially in the tundra, where if you look at real tundras, they typically have very sparse grass. And as you can see, all of these textures are working beautifully. And like I mentioned to you before, I prefer the kind of weathered look. That's why I don't use any farmhouse mods. I use FYX and I use Real Wood. And I believe between, like, this actually looks more like the color of, this more looks like the color of Lightwood here. And this looks more like, you know, it's aged, weathered, but it's still kind of the same general aesthetic, you know, it's like the same general color tone. Whereas I feel like Tomatoes farmhouses or Vanheimer or Wrighton's farmhouses kind of take away from that weathered, really rustic look, which is what I like about these. So I really like about this particular setup I have. Some more of these oak trees, which looks different than the HLT. I don't know if this is because of HLT's textures or exactly what's going on here, but tell me if I'm wrong, because to me this looks different than when I tested it with HLT. Yeah, and I use Vanilla Flora because I don't have I have a mod that's called Remove Unharvestable Plants. So basically, many of the shrubs and things I've just removed. First of all, because I don't think they're necessary.
What?
Especially with the kind of aesthetic I'm going for. Like Mari's Flora and Jacobos 3D plants, they kind of add too much, in my opinion. The spruces, the small spruces that 3D plants adds are too saturated. And Mari's is just as bad as vanilla. It looks just as good as vanilla. It's literally 2D plants. The same thing with Valart. Valart's flowers are not much different than vanilla flowers, so I've opted to remove many of the game's shrubs and thickets and just flora that's not usable, it's not harvestable. I've removed it for performance reasons. Because even on the PS5, this is a pretty heavy performance stack. And I just think this looks immersive. It looks real. It looks realistic to me. It looks very nice. And like I mentioned, my landscapes have zero seams. Zero, zero texture issues. Everything I have blends perfectly. Because I learned that you're supposed